You're the second-term mayor of Newton, Massachusetts. Congratulations on your reelection. What are you most proud of in some of your accomplishments in the Garden City thus far?
Well, you know, as noted, grew up here in Newton. You and I actually grew up right down the street.
That's right.
Where I live right now with my wife and two children, both 7 and 4. My daughter, Abigail, is in the Newton Public Schools. John will follow. In 2009, when I made the decision to run for mayor, I was very concerned with the deterioration of finances here in the city. Mm-hmm. We were in a financial crisis. Our infrastructure, our roads, our sidewalks were crumbling. Our school buildings were falling apart, mm-hmm. With no real path for making sure that Newton lived up to its full potential. And as a kid, I felt very fortunate. I know you did too, growing up in this great city. So I knocked on 11,000 doors and went directly to the voters, the people that I would represent, and it was clear they needed new leadership. It was clear that they wanted a chief executive that wasn't afraid to make tough decisions to move the city forward for the long term. So we assembled a terrific team, and in the first term as mayor, we made sure that we retained our AAA bond rating, which could have been in jeopardy. We built up our capital reserves. We didn't have capital reserves. We didn't have a rainy day fund. 5% of our reserves are now dedicated towards that. Moody's investors made it clear, and analytics made it clear we needed to put that in place. And we also made sure that we had long-term answers for our pension liability. We now are going to eliminate our pension liability by 2029, wow. Which is really important for our city. Beyond that, we created a capital plan that didn't exist, and we made sure that we can invest in education, infrastructure, both two, and public safety, the third. We went to the voters towards the end of my term and asked them for a little bit more money so that, and we put it on the ballot to go towards all these issues, infrastructure, education, and public safety. We were able to pass that ballot initiative. We're really proud of that. Mm-hmm. And as a result, we've been able to eliminate and decrease the huge disparities in our student population and their achievement. The achievement gap in the last 3 years, we've seen real progress with our kids coming from free and reduced lunch families and households, and kids of color. Really proud of that. We're able to reduce class size as well. And within the next 5 years, we're building 5 new schools, which we're really proud of. So we've done a lot of work on education. We're doing 50% more work on our roads and sidewalks. And we've done a tremendous amount around environmental sustainability.
Talk a little bit about that.
Well, you know, cities can lead. And one of the things that I was going to talk to you about today, cities are the engines of innovation. I really believe that in this economy across the country and here in Massachusetts. One of the things that we've been able to do on environmental sustainability, because of the work we've done around our solar projects and our retrofitting of buildings and our purchase of electricity, which is all green and has been in the last few years, annually we're able to reduce our carbon footprint by 2,800 metric tons of CO2 out of the air, out of the atmosphere, which we're really proud of. One of the latest projects we've done, we put in place is the LED street lighting project. We've changed all of our street lights out to LED street lights. Wow. We're going to save $40 million next 20 years. We can be environmentally sustainable, and we can, at the same time, reduce the carbon footprint. And we're going to go beyond that. We're going to go into residential and commercial. So we're really proud of that. We've also expanded the commercial tax base here in Newton, and I know we're going to talk a little bit about economic development, and that's the last piece I wanted to mention. I'm really proud of, when you went through Route 9 previously, you'd drive by this old blighted Omni supermarket that was sitting there. We work with the state and through private-public partnerships, in the state, we were able to improve that corridor, the infrastructure of that corridor, improve traffic, and at the same time create Chestnut Hill Square, which is retail, and across the street something called The Street with retail. And we've expanded our commercial tax base through that. In fact, our commercial tax base has increased by 26%.
Hello and welcome to Policy Beast. I'm Makita Keegan. Today on the show we have a very special guest, Nico Mendoza. She is the Vice President of Engagement Strategy and External Affairs at Boston 2024. What is Boston 2024? We're about to find out. Ms. Mendoza, thank you so much for joining us. May I call you Nico?
Absolutely, Makita. Thank you so much for having me.
Fantastic. So what is Boston 2024?
Boston 2024 is a private 501c3 nonprofit organization. We are the official committee that is pursuing the bid to host the 2024 Summer Olympic and Paralympic Games in partnership with the City of Boston and the U.S. Olympic Committee.
Fantastic. So we've seen probably a lot of that in the news, and I know that folks are probably unclear about the whole process, the whole bid process. So it sounds like we're what stage of the process are we in? Did we acquire the bid yet? I mean, so how does that all work, Nico?
Sure. We are very early in this process, and in fact, it's a very interesting story. I know your focus of the show is community engagement, and yes. Our beginning of our story actually started with two young men who at the time were college students, and one of whom was pursuing his master's thesis in design and was looking at a project to develop a marketing scheme for a potential Olympic Games hosted here in Boston.
Interesting.
And now he continued his project, got really excited about the opportunity of hosting the most prestigious international sporting event here in Boston and here in Massachusetts, was connected to another young man who also was a big fan of sports, big fan of the Olympics, also interested in pursuing this idea. They approached State Senator Eileen Donahue from Lowell to think about how to engage the public sector and elected officials in this process. And she filed legislation to create a feasibility commission to study the possibility of hosting the games here. And this was about a year and a half or so ago. So
wow, only a year and a half ago.
Only a year and a half ago or so, yes. And it all started with two young people who had a bright idea and are pursuing their dreams. So it's a really interesting story to start.
It's a great story. So where are we in the process right now?
So we are at the point, Boston was selected by the U.S. Olympic Committee in January to be its partner city to continue into the international phase of this process. We were among 4 finalist cities at the U.S. level, Los Angeles, San Francisco, and Washington, D.C., under consideration by the U.S. Olympic Committee, narrowed down from a field of about 35 originally proposed. It was a very competitive initial process with the U.S. Olympic Committee, but Boston, we were selected because we had an innovative plan that aligns with the future vision for the City of Boston, the region, and the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, and also proposes a sustainable, both on the environment and financial side, sustainable, creative, innovative model for games of the future.
So let's talk a little bit about the Olympics. You think about the Olympics in Boston, but actually, to your point, it's really a regional event. So how would Boston 2024 impact not just greater Boston, but surrounding communities?
Sure. Makita, that's a great question, and I think, when you think about the Olympics, when you think about the Paralympics, it is the personification of the power of sport, and a sport as the convener of communities and people. Really, that's the fundamental premise of the Games. You're absolutely right. We are proposing games that primarily would be hosted within the City of Boston and surrounding communities. But again, there is an opportunity here to extend the economic impact that we know will occur as leading up to, during, and after the Games to the entire Commonwealth, certainly to the Metro West region as well. And the way we envision that for sure is opportunities related to training camps, for example, leading up to the Games. We're going to need places to house and feed and train athletes from all over the world when they come to the host city 6 to 8 weeks in advance to get used to our climate, to get ready, to prepare. And our colleges and universities across the state make perfect hosts for those training camps. That's a very exciting opportunity. ready to realize some local economic impact in the form of tourism and hospitality.
Right.
And an opportunity for the communities to really connect with these elite world-class athletes.
With us, Richard Fries. He's the Executive Director of Mass Bike here in the Commonwealth. We're going to be talking about all sorts of transportation issues, not just bicycle related, but we will be focusing primarily on that. Mr. Fries, thank you so much for joining us on Policy Beats.
Great to be here. Even in the advanced talk we are having, I can't think of a more excited person to be talking to.
Oh, thank you very much. Can I call you Richard?
Sure.
Great. So first off, let's familiarize our audience with the mission of Mass Bike and maybe a little history. How did Mass Bike come about and what do you guys do? And gals do.
Yeah, a lot of gals, a lot of people. Mass Bike was started in 1977 as the Boston Area Bike Coalition. It's morphed through a few names. And then we became the statewide coalition for cycling. We started out as very much an activist group. The 70s were really a fascinating time. It's interesting. I started cycling in 1978,
Okay.
and shows you how old I am. And and at the time, we were real renegades. But if you look at what was going on, the Arab and oil embargo had happened, the rise of the environmental movement, a little bit of a counterculture that came out of the 60s. But here we were in the Boston area, the world's largest college town, and we immediately had a pretty big population of people that were living by bike. A lot of shops in the early 70s, after the Arab oil embargo, they sold out of everything. We went from, in 1972, I think we had, I might be off by a year, in 71 I think we did 4.5 million units of bike sales, and then it skyrocketed in 1 year to 15 million units.
Wow.
So everybody was grabbing bikes. But we didn't have the infrastructure. We had almost eradicated the bicycle from the public way entirely. And yet it sort of re-blossomed and came back in. And now we're in a different world. We're dealing with those outliers, which is what I was. We are now looking at the construction of rail trails, protected bike lanes like you're going to see on Com Ave. You can see we're taking some cues from the Netherlands and Denmark. We're going to have special cycling signalization. I think the city of Newton has just taken order on all these special lights, and we're seeing a consistent growth in the number of people cycling. And it's really been fantastic in and around the Metro Boston area, as well as a few great pockets, the Happy Valley, Northampton and stuff like that. But we have a lot of work to do. When I took the job in January from a brilliant predecessor of mine who really built a great foundation, I said we're not just going for a share of the road, we're going for a share of the mind now.
Now, so how are you going for a share of the mind?
I'm getting on a lot of TV shows like yours. No.
That's great.
Well, you know, part of the thing is we have to make it obtainable. We have to really speak to what the norms were, and it's really, I got to be honest with you, I am inheriting a great foundation, but I'm also seeing some amazing stuff going on demographically. There's a huge demographic shift right now. Brookings Institution, 1990, over 50% of 18-year-olds had driver's licenses. That number is down to about 28%. Kids aren't driving anymore. When's the last time you saw a muscle car with an 18-year-old behind the wheel? You don't see it anymore. Kids are viewing cars differently. Now, I had no hope of getting a date if I didn't have a car.
Right.
Kids today, they've got Facebook, they've got Twitter, they're texting. They just view automobiles as it's something to insure, to park, to fuel. It's like, can I live without it? I have a 21-year-old son, and I haven't pushed him on it. Still doesn't have a driver's license. Student at Suffolk. So we're seeing demographic shifts as to what's going on with the youth, but we're also seeing a really big change in, I think we're looking at some of the health issues, some of the congestion issues, and the growth in bicycle commuting is just growing in leaps and bounds. We can't keep up with the demand.
I was going to say, so over the past, just even the past few years, you know, just anecdotally, I can see that there are more and more people on the road biking to work. They're clearly commuters, and they're coming. You know, they're coming. It seems from all kinds of distances. It's not just, you know, that quick 20-minute ride, but you know, what are some of the issues that you've heard from some of your bike commuters about some of the things that they're concerned about?
Well, you know, you always have. You know, it's really interesting. We talk about the primary concern. Let me just roll back. Big study recently interviewed hundreds of people, and they figured out that there is 1% of the population is a knucklehead like me, totally fearless, totally confident. I don't care. I don't need a bike lane. I don't need a share. I'm riding.
Okay.
I rode in the 70s. The other 30% is no way, no how.